Survivor's ready. Go!
Travis spoken.
Boston Rob and Amber are gonna do it.
This is a business trip, as I like to say.
You Brad Culpepper.
I'm tired of you and the fucking chicken.
You can call me the puppet master. They can be my little puppets.
It's not like you make me deal with the devil here.
You get to milk your own milk, I guess.
We got enough rocks here, too. We could build a pretty decent shelter just using rocks.
I'm supposed to talk loud.
Direct from Hobart, it's time for the only Survivor podcast in Australia dedicated to Survivor, bringing you today's interviews, episodes, and opinions from the greatest reality show on the planet. It's Survivor Oz, and here's your host, Colin Hildy. Hello and welcome to Survivor Oz's newest show, or our B show, or our table scrap show, or whatever we're going to call it. Right now, I don't even know if we have a title. I'll call it the Ozlet Topsy, because that's basically what it is. It's an Oz Topsy, just with Ozlets. No Ben, no Noah. So, if you're a fan of theirs, you can tune into their show, but let's be honest, you're probably more likely to want to hear the group of people we have here, because we have a few people who have not even talked about Survivor in a long time, but let's just go around and do quick introductions. This week we have a couple of people on the line here to discuss the premiere episode of Survivor. Blood versus brains versus beauty. What are we even talking about here? Brains versus brawn versus beauty. The official title, what is it? Kaoh? Kaoh. Let's just call it Brains, Brawn, Beauty 2. And first up, possibly your host next week, possibly the only time you're going to hear him talking about Survivor this season. It all depends on what his opinion is, which we'll find out in a second. Anthony Rossi, welcome back to Discussing Survivor.
Yeah, it's been a long time. It's over a season. So this will be a bit rough to start.
Somebody who we know stuck with all of Cambodia. We had everybody reading her live tweets if you listened to our Oztopsies last year. Kristen Kennard is back to talk about Survivor. First, give us your thoughts on Cambodia. You saw the whole season. You saw the finale. How did it turn out?
You know, I did actually watch the finale after that girl that I don't like was voted out.
Which was the girl you don't like?
Kelly.
Oh, Wentworth?
Yes.
Wigglesworth, Wentworth.
Yeah. I watched the finale.
Yes to both?
I don't call her by her last name. She has a first name.
Well, I know they both have the first name Kelly, which is why I'm wondering which
The
Kelly.
one that was voted out in the finale.
Okay, Wentworth. There you go. Let's move on. Who else is here today? Alec. Feels like just yesterday. Yo. It feels like just yesterday we were discussing The Amazing Race. How is it to be back talking about Survivor?
It feels great I think I was in the penultimate episode of Cambodia. That was the last time I was on, when we just talked about how stupid they were to get rid of Abby, but turned out to work just fine. But yeah, glad to be back. I like this season already.
And Jordan, how are you doing? How is it to be back on Survivor and off The Amazing Race? He's loving it, everybody. Jordan, are you there?
Oh, sorry. No, my mic was muted.
All right.
Sorry. Well, I was just saying I like Survivor, and I know more about Survivor than The Amazing Race. And yeah, it just seems like yesterday we were recording The Amazing Race Oz.
Because it was just yesterday, if anybody's wondering.
Yeah.
Let's start off here. We're not really sure how this episode's going to go, so if you're already ready to tune out, give us at least another 40 minutes or so to see if this works out. General thoughts on the episode. We might as well start off with that. Alec, why don't you go first? You're first on my screen here. What did you think about the premiere episode of Kaoh?
I definitely thought it was a really good premiere. Like, it wasn't like a great premiere, but it was probably the best one since Kaoh, which that one had the double episode premiere theme. But yeah, it was a good episode. Wasn't like a great episode, but it was a good one.
Kristen?
I actually really enjoyed it. I'm not a big fan of over showing idols and stuff, and so having a premiere that wasn't super heavy on that, like the last couple of seasons, they've had like, oh, you have to go make decisions about idols, and instead this was more just like camp life and getting to know the people, and so I kind of enjoyed that more.
Jordan?
It had me hooked from the first time when Jeff just said, "You were watching 18 Americans," and it's just complete throwback to season 1, and I'm like, yes, that is how it should be. And it was like the entire segment was, a copy of season 1, and it was great to see that. And just with 3 tribes, like the rest of it was pretty good. I mean, again, and there wasn't even that much strategy until towards the end, obviously with Tribal Council, and there were a lot of character scenes, a lot of people got introduced. I think everyone got a confessional, at least one.
Everybody got one.
Yeah, and I still don't know some of the girls, especially the ones on Beauty Tribe, but I think just about everyone we got to know.
Rossi, what about you?
I really liked it. Following 2 really, really shitty seasons, it was really refreshing.
I was about to say,
see this.
what's refreshing is to hear you saying you really liked something in relation to Survivor, it has been a while.
I agree. I agree so hard.
And I love the entire cast. It's weird for me to feel this way. I usually hate someone. Well, actually, no, I do. Okay, I like 17 out of the 18 cast. So,
are you going to spoil who the 18th that you don't like is?
It'll probably come out eventually.
All right.
I think we know by his predictions.
These are our teases to actually stick with us for the whole season. If you already think this is the worst show in Survivor Oz history, you can actually one day find out who Rossi hates, which...
I think the worst episode may be the best of 2015.
Yeah, very good point there, Ben, if you're listening. No, there were 2 things that were brought up there. Kristen, you brought up one thing about...
But they didn't have the choices. They kind of just marooned, and then everyone got to know each other and started building. It felt like an old season.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jordan, you kind of said the same thing. So let's start with that. I feel like every single season we're all saying, at least during the premiere episode, this felt a little bit more old school. I mean, it's been, 3, 4, 5 seasons in a row where it's like, oh, this was an old school twist. This was an old school thing. The fact that there were no idols, we could talk about that. The fact that even in the end, the vote was basically, it did come down to idol splitting or splitting the vote in case of an idol, but it didn't feel like it was ever even mentioned on screen. So I almost feel like this show's now being presented in a way where they want us to forget a lot of these new school things that maybe have just become stale, and it is a more intentional throwback, or maybe that's completely wrong. Maybe this is just 3, 4 seasons in a row where we all, because it's the premiere episode and haven't seen anything yet. But any thoughts on that, Alec?
One of the main things that I thought was very old school. So if you don't know, whenever I do Survivor, I try to keep my own confessional count to try to help me pick a winner later on and stuff. But if you go back to the older schools, when it comes to episodes, you have some people getting you just have everybody getting a ton of screen time, and that's kind of what we had, which the 90 minutes helped. We only had one person with only one confessional the whole time, and everybody else got a ton of screen time outside of that. That, along with the whole, only one person was even mentioned, but when it came to idols. Mm-hmm. And that was only a 5-minute scene of the whole episode.
And am I wrong, or did that not even really get mentioned as far as Tribal Council goes? Because obviously they were splitting the vote in case Alicia had an idol, but was it even played up on at any point, or did I miss that?
Well, no, the Braun tribe never talked about an idol. I feel the whole splitting of the votes, it was supposed to go in there 5-1, according to what happened, but then Darnell's plea made Kyle, Jason, and Sydney flipped is what I've understood.
Kristen, what do you think about the whole vote splitting thing? Was it actually a way to possibly flush out an idol, or was it completely random and just the Darnell thing winning somebody over?
Well, they did talk about idols. There was a very brief conversation
Alicia's bad bluffing, basically.
Yeah. So she was asked if she knew if Darnell had an idol, and then they put in the clip of Alicia, and they just tried to make her look as dumb as possible, which was pretty amusing. But what was the question?
Well, whether there actually was idol splitting going on the final vote.
Oh, It was actually tough to tell. I'm really curious when, because Darnell doesn't actually know, I guess, because I was listening to some exit interviews, and I think that he thought it was for a vote split for an idol, but it was really tough to tell based on the editing, because I think Sydney wanted to go with Darnell anyway, and then Kyle Jason, whatever we're calling him, he almost seemed to contemplate changing his vote at tribal council. When Darnell was talking, we had the subtitles of are we doing the right thing, which isn't something that I think really comes up that often at tribal council. So I really don't know if they meant to go in and have a vote split, but I think it was really interesting regardless, just seeing them even contemplating changing their votes at tribal council.
Yeah, Jordan, I think you mentioned too, the whole old school feel to this. I thought that especially came out in the tribal, and like Kristen was saying, it's not really clear if there was any vote splitting going on. It actually took me until probably, I thought when that vote ended that they were a split tribe. It was a tie vote. So I was thinking, well, for the first time ever, we have an indecisive tribe. But even outside of that, it felt to me that this was a little bit more old school as far as the strategy goes. Throughout this episode, we had a couple of alliances form, but the alliances, I feel were almost more targeting the people for performance reasons, things you would have seen in Borneo or Australian Outback. I don't think they're going to help in the challenge. And a lot less about strategy. Jordan, do you actually think that this, again, is the way the season is being presented, or that these people maybe are valuing things like work ethic more than they're valuing, well, who's a threat and who can I take to the end?
I think, the season is really being billed as, the toughest physically season of all time. So I think that's going to be a factor, and I don't think it's going to be as strategically focused as usual. I'm not sure about the social part, but I mean, the part of getting physically wrecked is the tribe members' response to it. Are they going to care for this person, or are they just going to say, sorry, we're sorry you feel this way, but we have our game to play. We might have to vote you out. But I think that's what's going to happen, is that it's going to be more injury based, and we even saw there were two medical issues in the first episode, and I don't know if it's going to be socially based. I mean, this episode certainly was there was far more character scenes and camp scenes than strategic scenes. Just going back to the Darnell thing, I think, I'm guessing I heard on the exit interview that it was a vote split, and the producers probably said, we have a tie here, we should go to commercial break, before they re-vote, just to keep the suspense up of who's going home. I think they did decide it was Darnell because they had, a unanimous vote on the re-vote. So I think that's what happened there. But yeah, I don't think there's going to be as much strategy here as Cambodia, for instance, or Cagayan, just because of the injury hype and the responses to that.
Yeah, Rossi, do you think that this is maybe a precursor to the fact that this won't be a strategy heavy of a season, and that they would rather just present this all as an old school type thing? Or is this maybe just we've all talked about, it just gets so idle heavy and stuff like that. What do you think the motives are for the producers or the editors to leave out things that we would normally see to try to present the show in this more old school way?
I don't know, I'm a bit off with that, just because I think the vote was more strategic than you guys are claiming it to be. I don't think it was, we happen to like Alicia more, or I don't think it was based on total social kind of values in that. Mm-hmm. But I do think that the reason they're kind of editing it in this more camp life and social game than the strategy may have to come down to the fact that there are going to be so many medevacs that they're have to stress that it's a tough a game to play, physically and socially it's tough to play.
Well, I think I agree with you that there was a lot more strategy going on. I mean, for people to keep Alicia after what we saw in this episode, there has to be some strategy to it. But it's so unusual that when the show usually is trying to overhype the strategy that's already there, make it seem bigger than it is, that they're leaving this entire thing out, and it makes it feel like this is Borneo where, oh, we don't know whether we should vote out Sonya or somebody else. I think the fact that you mentioned the medevacs, that may be it, because if you're building so much strategy early on and then you have 3 people who end up getting medevaced, well, it might feel like a waste of time. So I would think that might be the reason why. Do we have any predictions? Let's talk about the medevacs, because one of the things I made notes on was the fact that Jeff did say this is going to be the toughest season ever. And I thought that was just him overhyping it. But I mean, in this first episode, we saw a bug crawl into somebody's ear, which that was gruesome. I mean, is it just an omen of things to come? The conditions here, they don't seem like they're that much harsher than other seasons, so who knows what it could be. But do you think that that's overhyping, or will this really live up to the harshness of the season? Alec, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I kind of feel, since you were kind of asking for predictions, it's odd that Jennifer and Aubrey's only confessionals were about the injuries, I guess you could say. Like the bug in the ear and the panic attack and stuff like that. So that might be a red flag in a little bit. But yeah, I feel it's just the fact that, there's been, like, certain things where, like, for example, Sandra and Pearl Islands ended up having to get treated for, like, fire ant bites or whatever when she got home, and it's like, but they never talked about that on the show.
Yeah.
And so, just like how Rossi was talking about how this season's built so much about, like, it's being the toughest season ever, they kind of have to emphasize these smaller ones. Like, there's probably been plenty of people that have had maybe a panic attack at some point on the island, but they never really showed it because they were trying to show the strategy aspect. Whereas this one, they're trying to show it a lot more of how hard it was. Like, Kathy on the first Fans versus Favorites. Like, they had to show her having, like, the toughest time ever because she was going to eventually quit because of it. And it's like, so I feel that's what they're trying to build up, is this is such a tough season. Even from day one, it was so hard for a couple of survivors and stuff. And so later on, it'll be just as hard when people actually have to get taken out.
Kristen, do you think when we see Aubrey, because I had a real hard time doing the power rankings this week. For one thing, there's not a lot of people who came out super strong in the first episode, but I think some of the ones that did, like Aubrey or like Jennifer, who had these good alliances form, suddenly it's looking like, well, episode 1, they're having such a hard time. Do you think that the show, again, is presenting them as characters that are going to completely fall apart and they will be medevaced, or can this just be like they're building this scene? So basically, are these scenes just trying to build how harsh the whole season is, or are these more setups for their characters?
I definitely think that it's more for the whole season. They're kind of just, like, already showing, like Alec was saying, that the first 3 days were this tough, that we're going to see how much worse it gets. I'm a little bit confused about Aubrey's first episode. Like, she had a full, like, character arc in the first episode where she went from this, like, girl losing her mind about actually being on the beach, and that it was more a mental thing than a physical thing happening with her. And then she killed the challenge, and she was like the MVP of the episode and the challenge. So I don't really know where to go with her, but I really don't think that in any way is saying that Aubrey or Jenny are going to be the people medevaced.
It made it really hard to do the power rankings, and I think that's one thing, if I'm going to give this season credit for anything on the first episode, it's that we don't really know, because if we see somebody in the first episode in tears and freaking out, whether it be because of panic attack or a bug in their ear, we're almost pre-programmed now to be like, well, this person's going to go early. Jordan, just before we change topics here, have you ever had a bug in your ear?
No. And after Jenny's experience, what she described it, I'm glad that I haven't.
Punching her from the inside?
Every time I think about that, it almost feels like a nightmare to me. Like, that's one of the few times where you could really empathize with a person. And there was blood pouring out of her ear, too. Like, that, no joke, that was one of the most gruesome things I've ever seen on this show. Rossi, any bug attacks you've had in the past you want to share with us?
Outside of a few bee stings, no.
There's one character that I want to... I mean, we'll kind of get a point later on to talk about, I guess, characters that are standing out for us or whatever, but the one I want to talk about mostly is Ty. Wow, where do you even start with this guy? Ty with his idol search. Like, what do you do with a guy who is the clear swing vote, who is pretty much necessary? Like, they can't just get rid of him. He's necessary for either side on his tribe. But yet he's going out there and he's looking for idols and he's covering it really poorly and he's getting in people's faces about hurting trees. And then, I swear, some of those things, quote-unquote, dead trees that he was ripping out of the ground, like, these things were green and he was digging them out. Like, he was ripping out these live trees after going these rants. Just such an unusual character. Jordan, do you have any read on Ty at this point?
Well, there's two sides to his edit. Like, the one side is him telling the story of him being a refugee from Vietnam, and that either sets him up for a run towards the end of the game, or this is his boot episode, and next episode may very well be his boot episode. And then the other side is that he's a schemer and trying to find idols, and like he said they were dead trees, and then he like ripping up the trees. He's like, "Sorry, tree,"
and then he beats them.
Like, and he was getting offended at somebody chipping away at a branch, and then he's ripping entire trees out.
He's like, "Sorry, tree," and I was saying to myself, I thought it was a dead tree, and so yeah, he's a character. So like I said, it could be going out early, just based on his edit, or he could be going far based on his edit. So it's going to be, I don't think there's no middle ground with Ty. Either early or, kind of a run, I guess.
Do you have any read, Rossi, on where Ty could end up on this season?
I just want to say, I think that's funny. There's like 3 options now for this season. It's like, you're either going to go pre-jury, or you're going to be like in the late game, or you're just going to be like medevac.
You are either going to win, lose, or be somewhere in the middle. It's going to be one of those 3. That's all we know.
Okay, but I just want to say, like, I don't care, like, if fans are on the show or I don't care that much as long as they're interesting. But like, I don't know where Ty stands, whether he's watched the whole show a lot or not. But that is so much effort for production to plant an idol and then plant a tree on top of it.
Yeah.
That is so much work.
Well, he said also there's...
where his thought process was, like...
Well, he said there's 3 dead trees there. It's very unusual for 3 dead trees. One of those trees was dead. The other 2 were completely normal. So I don't know what he's seeing, but I would love, like, if we had every single episode just Ty come up with some other random thing, because usually we get people who are looking for idols and they have that, I guess, the clue in their head. Like, well, it's usually buried underneath something, or it would be inside, a tree, a hole in a tree or something like that. It would just be hilarious if every single week he has some other random thing that he's trying to base this on. It's completely off base. Like, I think it's gonna be in somebody's underwear, or it's gonna be, hanging with the bats in the cave or something like that. And we just see him just make a complete mess of thing every single week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to stick on Ty for a second, because he mentioned how even he thought he was, like, everybody who looked at the tribes probably said, this guy is on the beauty tribe, like, it's just the most unusual thing in the world. But even he called it out. He's like, I have no idea what I'm doing on the beauty tribe. I felt like this entire season, and if anybody disagrees with me, feel free to make an argument, please, but I feel like this entire season, like, I'm looking at these tribes and I don't understand it. Whereas with the first Brains, Brawn, and Beauty, you could look at these tribes and on their own, and you could be like, okay, well, this one's clearly going to be the Beauty tribe, this one's going to be the Brawn tribe. Everything just seems messed up with me. Like, I don't know many of these people where, just on first impression, I was reminding myself as I was doing the power rankings this week, okay, well, which person's on which tribe, because it's a big mess. Was there any thought put into this year? Is this just completely random? Was there a point to even doing the concept? Alec, you want to go?
One thing I will add about Ty really quick is that when everybody caught him finding the idol, he's like totally upfront about it. And he's just like, yeah, I thought it'd be over here by tree mill. I'm going to keep looking. You guys go ahead and like leave or whatever. It's just like, I thought that was gold.
Yeah, that'll make him feel better. Yeah, I was looking for an idol. The proper thing to say would be, do you want to help me? But instead, yeah, I'm looking for an idol. Can you leave me be right now? I think I'm on to something.
Yeah.
Can I just
But
say, is that the first time that someone has been caught looking for an idol, other than like Mookie and Lisi and Fiji?
I feel like it's happened in one of the recent seasons. I just can't think of which. Well, I guess the whole Spencer Wu thing where everybody was looking at the same time, but that was a little bit different, I guess.
Yeah.
And there was kind of Morgan kind of got caught, but she came up with that good lie.
Yeah, I mean, she was the only one there at the time, I guess, too.
Uh-huh.
It's definitely the first time where someone got caught by a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's also the first time that somebody asked for 5 more minutes to keep looking after they got caught.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know.
Like, I just made Ty even better. Like.
What's going to happen with this guy? So yeah, Alec, the whole
tribe divide.
Mixing up of the tribe dividing, like, is there any rhyme or reason this time? Was this just a last minute thing they threw in there?
I feel a lot of it, like, if you look at, like, every single person, basically everybody can be on 2 or more tribes.
Yeah.
You know, for example, Nick could be on Beauty or Braun, or, you know, but then there's the couple that, like, only can be on 1, you know, like, for
Jason.
example, like Neil could only be on the Brain tribe. Like, he really wouldn't be good on anything else, you know. Sydney, you know, the bodybuilder, like, she could only really be on Braun and stuff. Like, not saying that she's not pretty or anything like that, but like,
I thought that Sydney was on the Beauty Tribe when I first saw her, but of course when you find out what she does, you know it's going to be Braun, just like with you know, Jason, I guess, Scott.
And so I feel this was just maybe they were like, oh, we have these 18 people, and we have this, like, quantitative strategist, this ER doctor, this former FBI agent and stuff like that. We can bring this concept in this time around. And so there was that Ty, who is kind of like that one. Well, we already filled up the Brain tribe. We already filled up the Braun tribe. Like, he's a gardener, so he makes things beautiful. And so we'll put him on the Beauty tribe, you know?
But they also, like, have those casting tropes. Like, Bryce on the Beauty tribe was, like, people were questioning that. And it's like, oh, it's just because he's gay that he's on the tribe. And I'm like, are they doing the same thing again? And then I, like, look to the Braun tribe in Kaoh with Cliff, and now we have Scott, the former athlete, too.
I was wondering because I remembered that, who was it, Tyler on Worlds Apart. Like, let's face it, the same concept, Worlds Apart, is Brains versus Brawn versus Beauty. But Tyler was even saying that, you know, he was put on the whole white-collar tribe, but he had left his white-collar, you know, job, that he was a complete no-collar guy, and that he was supposed to be on no-collar. So we know this happens in seasons where somebody is supposed to be on one and then they switch to another. But I just feel like the difference is that in even Worlds Apart, where a lot of these people have admitted after the show, I could have been on any of these, they owned it when they were on the screen. And it comes down to something that's just really weird with the editing here, is that it feels like the show is going out of its way to say, hey, there's no real point to us doing Brains versus Brawn versus Beauty. Kristen, did you feel the same way or not at all?
I don't know what you just asked.
The fact that they have a character like Ty saying, yeah, I don't know why I'm on the Beauty tribe. You know, you have all these other people who don't really seem like obvious choices, whereas in a show like Worlds Apart, even when somebody wasn't an obvious choice, the show still presented somebody like Tyler, like he's totally white collar, and Shirin, people like that.
I still don't really know what you're asking, but
Jordan, do you have a clue what I'm saying?
I don't know.
Rossi, you got to be following this, right? Like, the show is almost going out of its way to destroy its own concept this season. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. It just seems unusual that they would let's tie ourselves to this Brain versus Brawn versus Beauty thing again. And then in the first episode, they're not really drawing attention to the fact that these are Brawn people, other than the quick mention of saying, what is Alicia doing on here? And then, Ty, I mean, that really is drawing attention to the fact between Alicia and Ty and others. They're basically drawing attention to the fact that this was like a last-minute thing.
Agreed.
Rossi agrees with me.
Yeah, like...
Well, I agreed.
Like, I can actually see why Ty is on the Beauty tribe, just because there's no other place, really. I mean, unless maybe he could have been a brain person, but then again, like, if you're a gardener, like, people won't associate you with being, having a high IQ like the guys on the Brain tribe. But to me, the bigger question is, what is Alicia doing on the Bronze tribe? Like
she grew up around boxing and stuff.
Yeah,
so she's like
yeah.
she does boxing on the side, and
And
I think
what was
that's
it,
kind of
bungee jumping or something like that?
Yeah.
I don't think she even does boxing. Like her
She's been
dad
around
was.
it.
Her dad was a boxing something
Yeah, well, and
promoter.
This is kind of what I'm getting at. I mean, it to me it feels like, you know, when you have a season like Worlds Apart, we know that they basically will come up with a concept and they'll try to cast the show as best they can and say, well, where can we throw this person? But this just feels completely different from any time they've done in the past. Even when, like, looking at Panama, where we're going to have older women, younger. I mean, you had characters like, Shane, who was kind of right in between, and Courtney, who was right in between.
Yeah,
But
Bob Dog.
this time, it honestly feels like they just came up with a cast for a regular season of Survivor and said, let's just call it Brains versus Brawn versus Beauty. Like, we have Alicia already, we have Ty, we have people, we're looking at, like...
Nell even wasn't really much of a brawn either.
Yeah, I mean...
He's a student or whatever.
All
he
over
doesn't
the
have a
place. It
job
doesn't make
like
sense.
that.
I think maybe with these newbie seasons, they kind of want like a way for viewers to separate them. I know that doesn't help with like, wait, why is Alicia on Braun?
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of like gives a name to each tribe when there's 3 of them instead of just 2, because I guess 2 is easier to separate in your mind. So with 3, maybe they think it just helps viewers because, going back to like Philippines, they had returning players, so it's kind of like, oh, this is Russell Swan's tribe.
Yeah.
So I wonder if maybe it's just a little bit of trying to categorize them in our minds, because even though we know that Darnell and Alicia aren't really bronze, we are saying they're not bronze, why are they on the Brawn tribe? So we know they're on the Brawn tribe, and it kind of just clicks everyone together in a way, I think, maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the same time, Rossi, you're good with stats and stuff like that. When was the last time we just had random tribes and they weren't separated? Because, like Kristen was saying, you had, the Russell Swan, the Jonathan Penner tribe, obviously, even in Nicaragua. I mean, would it be Samoa, or were there any after that?
South Pacific, probably.
Well, but even then you could say this is Coach's tribe and this is... Yeah. So,
yeah, but they weren't set until day 1.
Mm-hmm. But even still, like, just a way for the audience to identify who's on what tribe, I don't know. I think Samoa would probably be the last time that we even had, let's just allow this to be... It's so funny because I look at this as a newer thing where, okay, well, they have the Brains versus Brawn versus Beauty, Worlds Apart. But I remember even making the argument last season, or even during Blood versus Water 2, where it's like, well, they always had this. They had men versus women in Amazon. They had men versus women in Vanuatu, This isn't really a new thing, but, I mean, I didn't realize it went that far back. I mean, Samoa, Tocantins, those are really the last times we had just regular tribe separation.
Well, like, in the second Blood in San Juan del Sur, when they first did Blood vs. Water, you had, like, the returning players and the loved ones, but San Juan del Sur, you just had this group of people and this group of people, more. Because they did separate the loved ones, but, like, you didn't have the returning players and the loved ones. So I would say that's probably the closest we have to it recently.
Yeah, but still, I guess, a gimmick tying the season together. But,
yeah.
I mean, it
still is gimmicky.
I don't really look at Brains versus Brawn versus Beauty or Worlds Apart as gimmick seasons, because it's no more gimmicky than Vanuatu or Amazon or anything like that. It's more just, I guess, a way to promote the show. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, are there any other people who kind of don't belong here? I mean, Alicia and Ty are the obvious choices. Rossi, can you think of anybody else who really could be an easy switch?
No.
Nobody.
No.
Just firmly believe this is exactly the way that Beauty needs to be. This is the definition of brawn.
I think Caleb could be on the Brawn tribe.
I thought that Caleb was an obvious brawn too.
Yeah, Caleb and Nick could both actually be on Brawn tribe. I would say Liz is probably the other standout. Liz on the Brain tribe, because she's obviously a Beauty as well, but like she is a quantitative strategist. So
it was probably between Liz and Anna for being on
Anna
Beauty
too.
On Beauty or Brains, because I mean, Anna's a professional poker player, which you think could end up on Brains. Like, wasn't Garrett a poker player?
Yeah.
and he was
Yeah.
on Brains. So I think they probably were the two that could have gone either way for that.
Yeah, I mean, I know again, this is personal preference or whatever, but I know with Nick, my wife was watching with me, and she looked at him, she's like, what's he doing on the Beauty Tribe? And then when he took his shirt off, she's like, okay, that must be why. But
he's really not that good looking.
yeah, I mean, I didn't think so, but, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
he's not my type,
watching,
obviously.
when I watched it a second time, and my mom was like, I don't think that I would look twice at him on the street. And I was like, I feel like douche mode cowboy is like more attractive than him, which is saying a lot.
But yeah, with Nick, the funny thing is that it almost is again like maybe countering what we said earlier with people trying to say, well, Ty, I don't know why I'm on here, Alicia, I don't know why I'm on here. We had all the other women of the tribe being like, what does he do for a living? Oh, he must be a model. And I'm like, is that the impression he gives off? Like, you look at this guy, you're like, hey, there's a model right there. Like, I didn't get it.
Maybe it's just the way he carries himself.
Probably.
Yeah. I think it is just him taking his shirt off. That's pretty much all it came down to.
But they also don't cast over the top ugly people. Like
what?
I'm
not entirely sure.
No chance
I'm going to play this. I'm not entirely sure what you just said there. What?
Okay, so Liz, people think Liz is attractive.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to make her they're not going to cast just a whole bunch of stereotypical nerds and them not be attractive.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
They're going to want people who look good in a bikini on the tribe.
Yeah, I mean, we had Tasha on Brains in the first season.
All these people are not on beauty, but they're also really attractive. So that also extends into this argument.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I mean, this is Survivor. At the end of the day, people could say, oh, that's superficial or not, but I mean, this is television. They're going to cast as many attractive people as they can, whether they fit into one category or another. So I kind of get what you're saying there.
That's what I was saying.
All right. We're on the same page here. I guess one other thing to just talk about, again, going along the lines with the old school thing, I found it a little bit unusual, the whole divide with, Debbie and Joe, I guess. I think it was Debbie who mentioned, I'm not really worried about building relationship, but she's still saying she wants to win, but she doesn't even get, well, there needs to be numbers in this. And I thought, well, that was just her. But then again, we have the other tribe, the Beauty Tribe, where there's this clear divide. You have the guys saying, well, let's form a guys alliance. The women saying, let's form a women's alliance. And yet nobody's cluing in and thinking there's three of each. It just seems like the numbers aren't being considered as much in this season. And this is what I was saying earlier, that I feel like maybe this could be a season where people are going more based on work ethic and stuff like that. Anybody else getting in any indications that this is going to play out differently, more old school like as far as that goes? Or if you have any comments on Joe and Debbie, just feel free to go at it. Alec?
One of the main things I would say, based on what you were saying, is I think the best example of it was on the Braun Tribe, because they had the original majority of alliance of Scott, Jason, Jennifer, and Darnell was the original four, and then they were like, oh yeah, we could easily bring on Sydney instead of Darnell, and boom, there's our four instead. They had the numbers, but they decided to flip on it so quickly, and they were just it wasn't oh, us four are gonna vote Darnell or whatever. It's just okay, we can just vote out Darnell because he wasn't good in the challenge or whatever. And it's I feel that's probably the best example of what you're trying to portray. It's they're not really worried about having the long-term alliance as much.
Yeah.
And so I feel that was the best example. On the Brain Tribe, we saw that young person alliance, with everybody going against Debbie and Joe, who they have more of the old school mentality, probably because they are 15 years old, at least 15 years older than everybody else in the tribe. And it's and so, yeah, I guess that's kind of the best way to put it, is some people might have this older school style, I think it was Scott and Kyle were oh, I want to have an alliance with the people who work hard or something like that. And so that's probably where you're going with that.
Yeah,
you
well,
can't
I guess
just pin it. Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
You can't just pin it down to age too. So I'm not saying that you were, but Ty was the oldest on the Beauty, but he was idols. Let's play the game.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and even with Joe, I mean, Joe is the oldest contestant we've had in who knows how many years, And
Rudy.
yeah, they definitely were targeting Debbie, but I feel like with Joe, I don't even know if did his name even come up as far as the younger people mentioning him as a. If nothing else, I feel like Joe presented himself in a way where he was, friendly enough and everybody liked him. At least that's the impression I got.
Yeah, they kind of said he was the red flag for Medevac. I think Liz was the one that said that, and it's just like they were just like, oh, Debbie and Joe, they're gonna bond because they're older. So us four young bucks, when they're like all in the water, and Debbie and Joe are just like on the beach talking, whatever. It's like they're not gonna help us as much in challenges because Joe, who's built out of stone, because he's 71 years old, even though he's probably outside of Peter is probably the strongest one on the tribe, and Debbie, who used to be in the Marines and stuff, or Navy, I think it was, but she's older, she's not gonna help it. It was more the young, but I think it was mostly Peter and Neil were kind of judging them more based on their age, whereas us from an audience, we just love them. Those are probably the two favorite people on the Baines tribe,
Don't speak for everyone.
Yeah,
well not everyone,
let's just.
Can I add on Joe and Debbie? This has to be one of the worst alliances.
No kidding. That's what I was saying.
There are two of them sitting on the beach. They're the oldest two people on the tribe by far, and the other four are in the water, probably talking about. They have to be figuring that, the other four are talking about them, and it's like I don't know if anyone remembers Holly in Nicaragua with Wendy in the first episode.
Yeah,
this is kind of like that, and it's one of the worst alliances I've ever seen. And as I was watching it, I'm thinking, what the hell are these two people think they're going to do together?
It's going to be hilarious to watch if that actually does play out. I just hope they don't do a tribe swap too soon in this season. I would actually really like them to just play the whole thing out and see if you could have a tribe of only two people and just let it be eliminated. But we kind of say that every season. But yeah, as I was saying in the beginning, let's quickly just cover if everybody has a favorite contestant and least favorite contestant. Let's kind of go in backwards order here. Rossi, who are some of your favorites and least favorites, and do you want to give us quick reasons why?
My favorite right now is Alicia.
Of all people, you were
her.
saying there was one person you hated, and I had her as a contender for somebody you would hate. But she's your favorite.
She's my favorite.
I'm not saying I don't like her. I think that she's a good character, but that's weird to be number one.
I don't know. I probably like it because her edit right now, but it was she's standing there at the puzzle and she's not doing anything. She's not even picking him out of the box or whatever. No.
Oh yeah, Jennifer has to say get him out of the effing box.
Who's your least favorite then? Who you have to tell us who. Unless you want to tease the whole season, but go ahead if you.
No, the wannabe try-hard bounty hunter can get off.
I'm kind of, I don't really know I'm not loving a lot of the characters so far this season in comparison to other ones. I kind of know what you're talking about. I think he's going to be an interesting guy for how the story's going to develop, but yeah, I don't know if I really love him as a character yet.
He's I got to be like Russell. Got to talk about idols and Russell's not even.
I'm getting Russell and Tony vibes off him, but more of an imitator. So I kind of know what you mean. Jordan, favorites, least favorites?
Well, I have Aubrey is my pony, and I actually really like her. She seemed like a Sophie kind of character, and that was what she said she was most like, Sophie and Cochrane. And I do like her. Unfortunately, all we saw of her was, I'm panicking and I might be sick, and I hope I have to do well in this challenge. And she did do well in the challenge, so that was great. Also, I think Scott is going to somehow pull out of this pretty well. I think he might.
He surprised me.
Yeah, he did. He might do. He just said it out front. I played in the NBA for 11 years, and that has worked the best out of anyone we've seen. Just saying, outright. That strategy, that's the first time anyone's used it, and they just said, oh, you played in the NBA? Oh, that's cool. Let's try and work together now. It didn't matter to anybody. And then so I think that's the first person who's been called out as, or no other person who's been called out as an athlete has survived their first tribal council.
Yeah, he's definitely not Culpepper, and he's not Rocker. He's presenting himself in a lot more diplomatic of a way too.
Yeah, that's true. And so those two, I don't know if I'm going to continue to like Scott, but he did really well, I thought, in this episode. His name didn't even come up as a possible target.
And who are you not liking?
It's tough to say. Probably Caleb, probably Peter, Neil, maybe.
It's the boring ones, I guess.
Yeah, and
not that
Jason.
exciting.
And Jason,
Ooh, Jason's taking some heat. We're backing Alicia and Aubrey so far. Yeah. Kristen, you're known for some pretty bizarre loves on reality television. Who's the one you're rooting for? Just hit us with it.
I'm actually rooting for the Girl Alliance on Beauty in general. Like, I don't have a favorite really out of Anna, Julia, and Michelle.
That's funny because I thought that Anna was like a real star, but I'm still having trouble remembering Julia or Michelle.
Yeah, well, Julia's the only blonde one, so it's easier. On my first watch, I was having trouble telling the difference between Michelle and Liz, who aren't even on the same tribe. Mm-hmm. But on my second watch, I already have it down. So I'm always loving men on every show of every, like, Survivor, Big Brother, Amazing Race. I always love the men. So this season is very confusing because those three women are my favorite people this season, and I also love Sydney, and I'm not really feeling any of the guys. Like, I do think...
This is going to sound completely wrong, but basically, Kristen's having strange feelings about women that she doesn't understand.
It really is, because I always get, like, judged for, like, never rooting for a woman, but I think that we're going to have a female winner this year. I think that they're much stronger here, and that the men are going to kind of implode. They don't really fit together, just looking at the cast. Like, we have the Scott and Jason alliance, which I think is going to be interesting, and I am looking forward to watching how it plays out. I don't love either of them, but I do think it's interesting. And I mentioned, I think just last night on the Amazing Race podcast, I referenced the Survivor athletes, that I really think Scott is going to kind of try to be more of like the Jeff Kent type, where he is there to play Survivor and not just be the athlete, which I think is always good. And Caleb, I didn't even watch Big Brother, and Caleb is probably my least favorite.
Any reason why?
He's just such a douche. Like, the way, I don't know, the way he was talking about Ty was so weird, and like making fun of his face. He just rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know. I think he's just going to get worse.
The thing is, for me, is that I didn't watch him on Big Brother either, but the fact that he comes from Big Brother immediately makes me hate him, which is probably just something where I dislike the type of people that are on Big Brother in general.
Was Hayden bad? Do you like Hayden?
I didn't originally. I did by the end of the season, but again, I had the same problem. Knowing that he came from Big Brother, I'm like, oh, this guy's going to be terrible. You know, it's just an assumption I have of people.
Can I just say, like, to sum up, like, Caleb on Big Brother, he started an alliance of 8 in the first week, and then that alliance fell apart by like the third week, and then they broke into a smaller alliance that he wasn't a part of, Caleb, and for like a month and a half he thought he was still the leader of the original alliance. So essentially for a month and a half he thought he was the leader of an alliance that didn't exist.
From what I've heard, he's kind of like the anti-Hayden, because Hayden was like the leader of his alliance. And again, I didn't even watch the season, but I've heard that Hayden is probably like comparable to Derek. Is that fair?
Who's Derek?
I'm talking to Jordan. I'm asking Jordan because he's actually seen.
I would not say Hayden is Derek because Hayden didn't start the alliance, whereas Derek did.
Okay.
Yeah, Derek was more like a Boston Robin Redemption Island sort of thing, except like he was more behind the curtain. Derek was.
Alec, you haven't given us your picks yet. Who are you rooting for? Or who are you hating?
I will say on Caleb, as far as a character standpoint, he is probably one of the best characters of Big Brother like ever. Just because he went from like this creepy stalker to this like super funny cowboy.
Yeah,
and,
he was like really funny towards the end.
Like I loved Caleb, and he was always that like one person. It's like, wait, can he win? Like, and he made Final Four. It was like, well, if he can somehow like win this next challenge, like he could, like if he could win that veto, like he could win this whole season. Like he was like that like dark horse towards the end, which was weird being where he came from. But he's not my favorite of the season. I'm gonna start out with my least favorite because that one's a lot more obvious for me. I really am not liking Neil or Nick. Neil just like rubbed me the wrong way, just the way he was like talking the whole time, and then Nick, I don't know what it was. His first confessional was just like seemed like so like rehearsed, like. His voice just in the first confessional just annoyed the crap out of me. Like he's like I am a model of da 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 da, and it's like it just seemed like it was like super rehearsed. And it's just like from then on I was just like I am not. And like his later confessionals got a little bit better, but it was just like it was just irking me in the wrong way. I don't know why. Just that one, the way he spoke in that confessional, like I didn't like. But yeah, Neil, he was just like so overconfident. He was judging people just based on their age, like Joe and Debbie and stuff. Like he's the one who started that young person alliance, just because the other two are old. And like he was getting mad at Debbie for talking too much when he was talking just as much as Debbie. Like, you know. And so those two I'm not the biggest fan of. I will defend Jason just because he was my winner's pick. His first confessional was probably my favorite confessional of the whole episode, when he's like, I'm a bounty hunter. Like, I go and kick in doors, and it's like, nothing against you. That's just my paycheck. Like, I'm going to beat down your door for my paycheck. And I thought that was cool, just how straight to the point he was. I feel that's kind of how he's going to play, which is going to hurt him later on.
Yeah, that could be a winner quote, too.
Yeah, it's like, my favorite, I really like how Scott was in this first episode. Like, he kind of had a similar edit to Rocker, but not nearly as controversial. As, like, Rocker had, like, a strong edit in the first episode of, like, being the leader of this alliance. And then, like, that ended up falling away. But, like, Scott had that, like, but nothing fell away from him. I think my favorite overall was probably Liz. Liz or Anna. Probably because Anna's my pony. But, like, both of those two stuck out a little bit for me. I think Liz had the longer confessionals, and she had character development and strategy, which was very rare in this episode. So
I don't think I'm loving any character just yet. It's kind of weird, and this could be because it's the first time in I don't even know how many years that I haven't looked at any bios going in. I didn't do any preseason, any type of preseason research or anything like that. So other than seeing the pictures and the names of the people, I knew nothing. And maybe that's the reason why I'm not loving anybody, but I would say, I mean, for me, I think Ty was the most entertaining character, but I don't know if he's the type of guy I really am going to root for throughout the season. So the ones I'm kind of pulling for at this point are the ones where I think there's the most potential out of them, which is probably like Scott and Anna, possibly Sydney too. I'm kind of on board with Nick and Neil, especially Neil, as just being like just a little bit too dull for me in the first episode. So I'm not really loving either of those guys. I guess the only other thing we should really cover before we go is just parting words on Darnell. Really quickly, anything to say on Darnell and his very short stay on Survivor? Alec?
Black trout.
Kristen?
I thought he had potential. I think it was disappointing first boot.
Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't show a lot of characters. It's sort of, you know, you might have expected a lot more out of him. Disappointing.
Rossi?
Like the world's worst lifeguard. I hope he's not protecting me from not swimming. Like, damn.
The biggest disappointment is that we have somebody who's a first boot who actually, I think, fought pretty hard for themselves and it didn't work out. So I think definitely there was potential. Usually first boots, there's not a lot of potential, but when somebody can fight that hard, I mean, it's too bad they went.
I was going to say, probably the most disappointing first boots in Zane.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hands down, I agree.
Mm.
One last question before we go. Which is going to be the winning tribe, and which one's going to be the disaster tribe, a.k.a. Brains from Kaoh? Alec?
I thought it was interesting that everybody was going into the season, like if you listen to the preview episode, they're all talking about how the Brains are going to like just get destroyed, and they won the challenge. Like they weren't even the second place team, they won the challenge. And the Braun was the one that lost, which nobody thought was going to lose. But I feel the disaster tribe is going to be the beauty tribe. I feel especially with the head of steam between Nick and Caleb, will eventually come to blows. And the strong tribe, actually, I will surprise everybody and say that's going to be the Brains tribe this time.
Kristen?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it's going to be more of like a worlds apart thing, and there's not really a disaster tribe or a strong tribe. Didn't everybody lose a challenge?
We could also just look at it in terms of which one's going to be decimated and get nowhere near the finals, too.
Yeah. I think Braun's actually going to fall apart pretty hard.
No prediction for who's going to hold together the best?
No.
Jordan?
I think with the Brains, like, they just figured the Brains would fall apart because the last season's Brains fell apart, but you don't have any Jatia on this Brains tribe, and you don't have a Garrett. You don't have a Garrett. You don't have a Cass to stir things up. So I think they're actually going to do pretty well. And it's... yeah, I think it's going to be like a tie between the other two as to who's worse. Like maybe they'll both lose twice.
Rossi?
I'm going to diversify the answer a bit and say it doesn't really matter because they're just going to switch it up in 3 episodes, so...
I'm going to kind of agree that Braun's going to be the disaster, because I think when you have a tribe with very few members, there's nowhere really to hide, and you're forced to play the game very quickly, which I think is something that hurts. Even if you look at a lot of the other seasons like this, the ones that go to Tribal Council first, they play so soon, it's almost over anxious, and they just blow it. I don't really hold a lot of hope for the Brains tribe, just because they do have people on there like Aubrey, who I think are just going to be a mess to deal with. So I think the only potential for a tribe to go on a sweep like Braun last time would be Beauty. So not that I really think Beauty's going to be that great. So it's maybe I am more agreeing with Rossi, but if anybody, I think Beauty will be the strong one, and then the disaster of Braun.
I think maybe more the Beauties have a better chance of doing well going forward. Like they showed that Girl Alliance, they think that might stay strong, and even if the men kind of flop, they have a chance of getting a bunch of their original tribe to the like later jury stage. That makes sense.
That's basically it for this week. So we'll be coming back next week, hopefully, if we haven't been canceled by the time this is over. But let us know if you like this episode, if you want to change anything, if you want to replace me with a host. That'll probably happen next week anyways. We'll kind of, as we said, be shuffling this around week after week. You'll get lots of variety with different opinions on here.
People can suggest topics for discussion.
Exactly, because one of the things we'll be doing is covering different topics of conversation, something that's very vague and confusing to some people. But throughout the episode, if any people listening to this want us to discuss something on an episode, feel free to suggest it. Feel free to tell us if you want to shout out on the episode, if you want to come on the episode. Apparently, we're making that available. That was one thing that Ben said to do. So anybody out there, any of the listeners who want to come on and join us for an episode, that's open as well. And any Ozlets out there who are listening who want to host next week or the week after, go ahead too. We'll get as many people on here as possible. And that's it for this week. So thanks for being here, Alec.
No problem.
And Kristen, you have had a 100% increase in your Survivor episode, so thanks for rejoining the show.
Good to talk about Survivor again for the first time in a year.
And Jordan, amazing race, Survivor, you do it all.
Yeah, I tried.
And Rossi, thanks for putting in as much effort as you can be expected to.
Okay, I suggest everyone go listen to the best of 2015 right now.
Survivor Oz Best of 2015, available for download, as well as the new Oz Topsy from Ben and Noah, as well as by the time this is up, the recap with Trish. So good night, goodbye, and we will speak to you next time on the train.